Well, hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Getting ready to record episode 109 of Mike in the Midwest. Let's do it. Got that set. All right, here we go. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 109 of Mike in the Midwest, the bonus mini podcast for the amazing patrons just like you of the Be Our Guest podcast. We're recording this show from the beautiful Be Our Guest podcast studios in St. Peters, Missouri. Actually, I guess it should be the Be Our Guest podcast studios in beautiful St. Peters, Missouri. Either way, on Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. Hope the show finds you well and you're having a great week. And hopefully you're escaping the heat. We've gotten lucky here in the Midwest right now. Today, the high is in the 70s finally, because it was smoking again. We had another heat wave passed through over the past few days, but we have cooled back down due to some rain. So things are good, but not so great for my wife. It is that time of year. It's back to school time. Today was her first day back to set up the classroom and get things set. Now, if you're a teacher, hold on. If you haven't gone back yet, hold on to those last couple of days of summer because that's what it's all about. You don't want to have to think about I know how it is because again, I taught for 17 years. I know that once July starts to get, July 25th, 26th, 27th, you're all of a sudden consumed with back to school. You're thinking about what do I got to buy for my classroom? Do I need to get the old chart to put this is if you're an elementary school teacher, because that's what I was. You're thinking about that chart where you got to put everybody's birthdays on them. You're thinking about how you're going to organize how the kids are going to turn in their homework this year. Do they still do homework? I don't know. I guess nowadays it's all on Chromebooks, but back in the day, we had paper, we had spirals, we had folders of various colors for every subject. And we were always trying to think about how we were going to organize our classroom. And now I would have never thought about this stuff, but I did teach next door to Pam for most of my career. And when I didn't, after that, we were married. So even when I went back to school, we always talked about things. So the thing was, we always kind of had a theme for our classroom that year because we taught on the same grade level. A lot of years we taught sixth grade together. So we'd always think about what's the theme for this year? Is it going to be baseball? Is it going to be the Cardinals? Is it going to be Mizzou? Is it going to be, hockey? A lot of sports going on there. I think back in the day, I wonder why that was, but we had a lot. We always would have a kind of a theme in our pod of our school for back to school because, and I'm sure this is true wherever your kids go to school, maybe where you teach that as you go back to school, the school looks great. As you come back in for meet the teacher or that initial open house in August or September, you go in, the hallways have the brand new, fresh, uh, have those fresh bulletin boards out there welcoming everybody to the greatest school year ever. And that is the greatest thing about teaching. I'll tell you that because now that I've worked 17 years as a school teacher and I've worked outside of, teaching and education here for the past 5 or 6 years exclusively kind of in a business type atmosphere. There's pros and cons to both. And I will say that the best part about being a teacher, there's a lot of good things about being a teacher. And the best part is when the kids come back and remember you and say, I really enjoyed being in your class because, at the time they drove you crazy and it was, you're pulling your hair out. Like they're not listening, but something got through. Maybe it wasn't the thing you wanted them to learn, but maybe they learned something and you're like, hey, whatever. That's awesome. Shout out to Allie who's tuned in on YouTube. Thanks for being here. But the thing was, with teaching is that it had a fresh start every year. So every year you had that opportunity this time of year. And I think this is true for parents. And this is definitely true for all the students that are out there. So parents, tell your kids that Mike from the Be Our Guest podcast told them this. Every year is a fresh start, no matter how rough last year was. If fifth grade was rough, sixth grade can still be awesome. If your freshman year was tough, and a lot of kids have rough freshman years, sophomore year, it's all start over. It can be an awesome sophomore year. If first grade was rough in your house because it was struggling because of the pandemic and everything, kindergarten was all messed up. Second grade, can be a whole new start starting next week or this week or whenever it happens after Labor Day up by New York. whatever it is, the greatest thing about being a teacher, being a student, being an administrator, being a community is that every school year you get to have a fresh start on things. In the business world, I've learned is that you don't get that fresh start. Like there's never a finish line and a start line. And the thing is, like as a runner, that's one of the things that you crave as a runner. And I think that's one of the things that ironically enough, that I don't use a training plan when I get ready for races because what I noticed was I would stress out a lot of times, like, okay, I got a long run on Saturday. So all week I would worry about that long run. And so the way my demented mind works is that I told myself is that if I just run a consistent distance every day, I take out that mental anguish of worried about the long run because I'm doing the same thing every day. So it's gone. Like I never have to do a long run. I just do the same run every day. So that's totally backwards, and that's not how you should train for any kind of endurance race. I get that. It's not optimal for your best performance. It's messed up, but that's just kind of how my brain works, and it's not right. But the thing about, teaching in this time of the year again is that fresh start. And so I hope for all of you, teachers especially, because God knows you've been working hard enough over the past 3 years. You've been having to teach not in classrooms. You've been teaching in your kitchen table. I know my wife taught right behind me in Paige's bedroom for months and months on end at a makeshift card table and using a Chromebook and all kinds of stuff that we rigged up so she could show the kids science demonstrations, not experiments because they weren't here, but she would demonstrate a science topic on a Mevo camera and they would try to pay attention on Zoom. You guys have gotten way more than you signed up for. So shout out to all the teachers. And hopefully this will be, we always say this every year. Hopefully this will be the normal school year for you. Hopefully it'll be a great year for your kids if they're getting ready to go back to school. And parents, hopefully you have a little piece of quiet here in September. You can slow down. But the thing is too, for a lot of parents that have kids that are involved in things, this is a great time of year. If you like it, like Mallory's getting ready to start high school. God, I can't believe that. Because remember, the VR Guest podcast started when Mallory was 2 months old. Okay. We started in March of 2008. Mallory was 2 months old, starting high school in 2 weeks. But the thing is, she's going to be cheerleading at the high school. So I'm excited for that because we get to watch some football because you guys know that I'm a huge football fan. So that means football is around the corner. I think the first game is in 3 weeks. The Jamboree's in 2 weeks. Mizzou football will be starting in, it's a Thursday night, September 1st. So in about 3 weeks. In this year, breaking news, for the first time ever, our season tickets are not on the hill because they don't sell season tickets on the hill anymore this year. They made some kind of a change at Mizzou. We have deluxe bleacher seats. We have a piece of metal to set our keisters on this year. I don't know exactly where they're going to be quite yet, but we, instead of sitting on grass as we have for the last, 15, 16 years, if you've ever watched a Mizzou game on the hill where there's the big painted rock M, that's where we've always sat, various places, depending on what time you get there. This year, we'll actually have an assigned bleacher seat to watch the game. So I'm pretty excited for that. I mean, I told Pam the other night at dinner, I was like, we're the Jeffersons this year. We are moving on up because we got a bleacher seat at Mizzou. I am so excited because I'm almost 50 years old and I finally get my little piece of bleacher at Faurot Field Memorial Stadium in Columbia, Missouri to watch some SEC football. We should have a good team this year. So anyway, long intro. How you doing? Good luck to everybody back to school. And again, they say, hope springs eternal in the spring. Hope springs eternal in the fall, guys. Mizzou could go 12-0 in the SEC. Not going to happen. But, I mean, we could. I mean, Alabama right now is 0-0. Michigan State, Scotty's team, 0-0. Mizzou right now is 0-0, but so is Vandy. So, it works both ways. So we'll see how it goes. And everybody's got straight A's right now. Kids, if you're a fourth grader, you have straight A's until you lose it. So just hang on to it. And you're going to be on that honor roll. You're going to be on the straight A honor roll come Christmas. You don't have to earn them. Just don't lose it. Just keep turning your assignments. Just keep working hard at every test, every quiz. You can do this. And teachers, don't start the countdown to Christmas quite yet. At least make it to Labor Day. And then you can start the countdown to Christmas. I get it. I've been there. Anyway, hope you're doing well. And that's about what's going on around here. We're counting down to football season. We're counting down to cheerleading. Paige swung by this past couple of days. She had an event out in Kansas City, so she drove from Chicago to there. And of course, we're halfway in between, so she stopped in for some lodging and for some food. And it's been great having her here at the house. So that was fun. And of course, last night, because she was here, we got to go have her favorite ice cream, which, if you're from St. Louis, if you are, especially from North County, we got to go to Fritz's. I know you're thinking, if you're thinking this is like a Midwest show and you're thinking this is a St. Louis based show, you're probably thinking I was going to say Ted Drew's, but we're not from South City. If you're from the city or South City, Ted Drew's is what St. Louis is known for. It's really good, guys and gals. That's what he always says on the commercials. But if you're from Florissant, where we're from, it's Fritz's, because that was the place everybody went. And actually, I went to church with the Fritz family when they started it way back in the day when I was a kid. And it's very good. And it's not ice cream; it's frozen custard, and it rocks. And if you ever go there, get the perfect pitch. It's not on the menu, but it is the best concrete they have. The perfect pitch, developed by Kyle McClellan, a former Hazelwood West pitcher that pitched for the Cardinals. They had it for a limited time during the Cardinals run, and that you can still get it. You just order it, and they know what to make, but it is not on the menu, and it's so good. It's got a lot of caramel, Reese's peanut butter cups. Hoo-hoo, solid. All right. So what else is going on? Oh, by the way, the Cardinals are in first place. Thank you, Brew Crew. Thanks to the Yanks for Monty. We appreciate you. And Bader is going to be great in center field out at Yankee Stadium. Just hang tight. You're going to get your guy. He's going to be awesome. We hated to miss Bader, but we did need some pitching. So thanks, New York. All right. So let's see. Let's go over the feedback from last week's show, because I'm getting a little long-winded in the intro. Last week, we kind of talked about those weird or strange and awesome things you got as a kid when you went to the grandparents' house that, you didn't get at your house. Like, it was never stocked in your pantry. For some reason, like, mom didn't buy you these things, or mom didn't use these things in her cooking. But when you went to grandma's house, boom, you got these like weird or special or awesome things. I talked about how when I went to, my grandparents' house, instead of mayonnaise on sandwiches, my mom's mom would always use sandwich spread. And you can still get this stuff at the grocery store. It's right. I think it's by the mayonnaise, but it's Kraft. It's called sandwich spread. It's kind of looks like Thousand Island, but it's like mayonnaise with like pickles and red stuff in it, and it rocks. But it's probably 1,000,000 calories. That's why I do not get it. But I just remember getting that pretzel rods, that Jiffy Pop that was in the thing, skillet kind of thing you did on the stove. We almost burned down my house with my grandpa when my grandma was bowling. So we had a lot of fun. Had all the tuna fish with the noodles with my other grandma. So let's see what everybody else said about this topic last week, because this is why I love doing this mini show, is that we can go over all of these um comments. And we had, oh my gosh, I didn't realize we had this many. So let me get in on these real quick, because I didn't realize that I had to hit continue. So let's start off with Deanna. Deanna, thank you for being a patron. She said, I grew up about 9 hours away from my grandparents, but we would visit 2 times a year. My grandparents would stock the house full of treats that we never had at home. I particularly remember Kool-Aid jammers. She says it was the 90s, but my grandpa would call them Cool Pops and have them ready to hand out when we pulled up. Yes, Kool-Aid jammers were great. I also remember being about 6 or 7 and telling my grandparents that I really like their nice toilet paper. My parents were on a budget and bargain brand only. My grandpa loaded me up with a package of Charmin to take home. That's awesome, Deanna. Yeah, don't squeeze the Charmin. No, that is exactly. God, you know what? Someday, if I'm ever a grandparent, that is exactly what I'm gonna do. So the grandkids home with some jammers and some fancy toilet paper. And then you're the hero, right? I mean, then you're going to write into a podcast in 5 decades about how awesome you were. Oh my gosh. This is exactly, I love you guys. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. Okay. Sarah Crawford. Sarah, thank you so very much for supporting the Be Our Guest podcast. She says, so my husband and kids just had this conversation in the car 2 nights ago. My kids didn't know my husband and my grandparents. So we love to share these stories with them. I grew up a lot like you, Mike. All my grandparents lived in my hometown. My mom's parents ran a restaurant. So going to their house after school was like ordering at a restaurant, and they would make us anything we asked for, literally. Oh my God, that'd be my dream. If my grandparents owned a restaurant, I would have never left. Anyway, my go-to every day after school was milk, gravy, and biscuits with a strawberry milkshake. Oh, perfect. I was a small child, so my granny's mission was to fatten me up. It didn't work. That was my grandma Rallman. We called her Grandma Rufus, my dad's mom. I was always at her house. She always wanted to, like, she would always go, she was always trying to fatten us up. And she would always say, "Do you want a penny's worth, a nickel's worth, or a dime's worth?" Like after church, we had lunch at her house every Sunday after church, and she'd just heap it onto your plate. Like she wanted to make us fat. It's a miracle we weren't. And the thing was, you mentioned like biscuits and gravy. My grandma made the best biscuits and gravy out of Bisquick. Do you guys remember Bisquick? This is another thing I forgot about. She had that box. There's a box of stuff called Bisquick. I don't even know if they sell it anymore, but there was always Bisquick in her house. Back me up again on the comments for next week. Do you remember? It was like flour or something, but man, she could make all kinds of stuff out of Bisquick. It was always in the kitchen. Bisquick. I just remember. I'm going to look at the grocery store anyway. Sarah continues. My dad's parents lived right next door. My grandmother always had Oreo cookies in an avocado green Tupperware container. That is weirdly specific, by the way, Sarah. She would only let us have two at a time, but I thought they were delicious. My granddaddy loved Coke, and he would have one in the afternoon. If we timed it just right, he would pour us some in a juice glass. It had to be the secret, though, because my grandmother did not approve of children drinking soda. Thanks for the memories, Mike. Thank you, Sarah. That is awesome. And let me tell you about real quick about Oreo cookies. I don't know if they were too expensive or whatever when I was a kid. We didn't have Oreo cookies at our house, but we had Hydrox cookies. You guys remember Hydrox? Hydrox, I think it was. I tore in high school. I would destroy Hydrox cookies in milk. I mean, 2% milk in Hydrox cookies. I go down like a whole like column. I mean, because I was a speed skater in high school and I played baseball. I burned a lot of calories, but man, I would crush Hydrox cookies. And I don't know if they were like the poor man's Oreos or what, but they were good. I think they looked exactly the same. Trisha Hellwig up in Wisconsin. Two things I only ever ate or drank with my grandparents were sugar cubes and bottled Kool-Aid. As a kid, I was amazed that you could press sugar into a cube. I remember sitting at the kitchen table during breakfast. While the adults were drinking coffee, I'd sneak a few cubes of sugar while we all watched The Price is Right. The Kool-Aid was kept in the basement fridge and came in these flimsy plastic bottles that were shaped kind of like old glass Coke bottles. It had this twist off piece that was always impossible to remove without accidentally squeezing the bottle and shooting some of the beverage all over the counter. Trisha, thanks for being a patron. Thank you. You always give us awesome feedback, Trisha, and I appreciate that. I have no idea about those flimsy plastic bottles. I don't know if we just didn't have that around here. We just had like scoops of, I don't even know how our sugar came in like just I don't know, it was pure cane sugar and it was kind of in a 5 pound little, it was like a just like a paper container. It was kind of like that. It wasn't anything special. You just kind of poured it into these, like the things that sat on the counter, the glass. I think we had like a goose that the sugar sat in as a kid at our house. That's way more fun though. Len, he says, following up from last week, Mike, here's an article about the overeating at Disney World. About halfway down, they discuss the Magic Kingdom Club Gold Key Card. So if you want to see about that, there's a link there on parkology.com. Come on over to patreon.com/BRGS podcast to check that out. And then Len follows up with, my grandmother on my mom's side always hosted Thanksgiving. And what I always look forward to on those days was homemade biscuits drenched in turkey gravy. Oh my God, you're killing me, Len. I love it. Anything gravy. You can ask Scott. Anything gravy, I'm done. Ask my wife. And biscuits are my weakness. Being the cook of the house, I know how hard it is to make a good gravy, but my grandma had it down to a science. Grandmas know how to cook. On my dad's side, his parents owned a drive-in fast food restaurant where you were served by car hops, like it was called Ike's Drive-In. I needed to know you back in the day, Len. It was the place to be in the little town of Portland, Michigan. He made his famous pizza burger at that. Oh my God, pizza burger at that place, at that restaurant. It was to die for. Grilled buns, a juicy burger patty, and hand mixed pizza cheese toasted in their pizza oven was absolute heaven. His youngest son took over the restaurant. After the restaurant closed, that son became the head chef at the state penitentiary. You kidding me? I got too many jokes. One of their modes of discipline was removing the pizza burger from the menu when the inmates were misbehaving. You have got to be kidding me, Len. Is that not considered cruel and unusual punishment to give that burger? Because right now I'm ready to drive up there. I'm ready to drive to Maryland because I know you know the recipe. I need this pizza burger in my life, and I don't need it like in September. I need this pizza burger before I go to sleep tonight. Oh my God, it sounds so good. And Glenn also provides a link showing the tiny little restaurant that was located in their front yard. So check that out. It's a Facebook page. Glenn, I love you. I wish I could have gone to this restaurant. And this is exactly what this podcast is about. All these comments are exactly what this podcast is about. Because I hope you're all smiling. Hope you're all thinking about all these things in your town. A pizza burger. And then it was he was the head of the state penitentiary, and they would remove it from the menu if people acted up. Oh my God, that is so great. This is what I'm talking about at dinner tonight, by the way. Thanks, Len. Dennis, my good buddy down in Texas, thank you for being a patron as always. He says, you got it right. You correctly pronounced Sabak. I guess I got it. That was the card game Han Solo and Lando were playing in Solo, a Star Wars story. I don't know much about the game other than the perfect hand is called an idiot's array and is formed from cards with values of 0, 2, and 3. There is a whole version of the game you can order through Amazon, and they have a version available in the Disney parks. Well, thank you. I'm going to check that out. The only sack I can think of that my grandparents had that I didn't get at home was the bowl full of candy that my parents didn't normally buy. It usually contained a lot of taffy and caramels that my parents didn't eat, but my brothers and I would empty the bowl before we got home. Exactly. And my grandparents, the Rallman grandparents, they always had a bowl of candy on their coffee table, in the room, I guess it was the family. I always got confused between the living room and the family room. I don't know which one's which. The one where we always hung out in and watched Johnny Carson with them. But they always had a bowl in the middle that had that old people's candy that had like the ribbon candy and the hard candy, but they also had like walnuts. They always had like a nutcracker, and not a fancy nutcracker, like, the guy that stands at Christmas, just like, a thing you would crack like walnuts with. And they always had, I guess my grandpa liked nuts, and I don't even know if anybody ate that candy because it just sat there forever, like the ribbon candy, the stuff you would get at the department store. Anyway, Jody continues from Cincinnati. We talk about her on the podcast this week. I love this topic. So fun to reminisce. I spent a lot of time with my great Aunt Lee from Serbia. She was my one and only babysitter my entire life. Although her sister Dorothy, my maternal grandmother, was an excellent cook, Aunt Lee couldn't boil water. She had this tiny little galley kitchen with cloth coverings over the shelves. Behind those shelves were always treats, chunky brand candy bar squares, Rolos, etc. I loved her dearly and loved peeking behind those curtains. It's almost like you had a little snack bar. I love it, Jody. My mother inherited her mom's baking and cooking skills. Oh no. She bakes pies from scratch and always made a cinnamon sugar roll up with extra dough. Nothing better. My kids love going to my parents' house because there is bound to be homemade treats abound. And that's what going to the grandparents is about, though. I mean, doesn't that make you happy, Jody, that when the kids, like, let's go to the grandparents and they know they're going to, because so many great memories, I realize this now that I'm in my late 40s, there's so many great memories are made around meals and are made in the kitchen and are made around food. We connect with those things. And that is such a great memory. Thanks, Jody. Hope you're doing well. Michelle, my good friend down in Boynton Beach, says, hey, Mike, my Nana always had tin roof ice cream in the individually wrapped Kraft cheese slices. So did my grandma. I love those things. We also had the tuna noodle salad thing you described, and my mom still makes it for family gatherings. Tangent here, Michelle. Not only did my one grandma have the Kraft cheese slices, my other grandma, my mom's mom, always had Velveeta. Always had Velveeta. And it was such a treat to have Velveeta over there because you would take the block out of the box and then you would unwrap it out of that silver foil. And then you'd have to go get that little roller cheese cutter thing that I guess they bought. I guess they sold it right there next to the Velveeta at the grocery store. And you would cut your little slices and you would get some crackers. That stuff was so good. Velveeta. I haven't thought about Velveeta in forever. Oh my gosh. This is why I love this show. On a previous topic, we had a restaurant near our airport called the 391st Bomb Squadron. That sounds like the one you described. It was World War II themed and also had the headphones to listen to the tower and had great views of the plane taking off and landing. It was where I got engaged many, many years ago. Sad, no longer there, but great memories. Okay, Michelle, thank you so much for always being a part of everything we do on the show. Let me tell you kind of on a tangent with that topic. Because again, I was talking about that restaurant called the 94th Aero Squadron that used to be near Lambert Airport in St. Louis. So I found this other podcast in St. Louis about 2 weeks ago, and it's called the St. Louis Chat Show. And they just started in January. So I don't know how I came across it. I think I came across it on Twitter. And so I don't know if you guys have ever done this. You found a show and like I'm just tearing through their archives. I'm going through every show that they've done over the past week because I've only found it for like the last 7 or 8 days. And I've listened to probably 10 shows. They do one show a week and it's an hour long exactly. But what they do is it's two guys about 3 years older than me that worked in St. Louis radio, but they talk about things from the 80s in St. Louis. So it's almost like Mike in the Midwest, but it's hyper focused on St. Louis, but not just St. Louis. It's hyper focused on, if you're in St. Louis, it's hyper focused on South County. Now, I grew up in North County. So a lot of their stories, I know of all the stuff they're talking about, but I didn't experience because they were dealing with the other side of town. So they're not telling the stories mostly of like cruising in the area that I cruise. They're not talking about the mall that I grew. They're not talking about Jamestown Mall. They're talking about Crestwood Mall. So it's super, super interesting because they're talking about clubs and stuff that I know about. But it's one of those things. They talked about the 94th Aero Squadron on their show because obviously the airport is something South County, North County. There was only one big airport in St. Louis. I found out though that was a chain. And so I bet you the 394th Bomb Squadron was the restaurant in this chain. So I bet you that was part of that. Now that I found that out just yesterday as I was listening to one of their older shows. Okay, we have two more comments. Here we go. Thanks for hanging with me. John Luther, thank you so much for being a patron. He says, my father's mother enjoyed baking and was good at it. I particularly remember her homemade oatmeal raisin cookies and snickerdoodles. When I would visit them up at their cottage in Maine, though, they would have Needhams from the store. I think I pronounced that right. This candy is a Maine treat dating back 150 years. They're a coconut potato mixture covered in dark chocolate, similar to a Mounds bar, but not. It might sound strange, but they were amazing. The company that made them commercially went out of business years ago, unfortunately, but we can still find them at candy shops when we get up that way. That sounds super. I love that too, because I love that stuff that's very regional. I'm not a coconut fan. Coconut kind of makes me want to yak, but that sounds great. And I would love to try it just because it's something from your area and it goes back there. So yes, thanks for sharing, John. That is so cool. And Carrie Good, our final comment. We had so many comments. God, you do not know how happy this makes me to have this many comments. Carrie says, one of the things my grandma used to buy for me and my brother were those small individual pies that were fruit or custard filled. My favorite were the chocolate or the coconut cream. We never had those at home. I think those, I don't know in your area, but they were the Hostess things, right? They were in like blue and red and yellow and green kind of plastic sleeves. Yes, the chocolate were the very best. And I never, ever got those at home. Oh my gosh, you guys have brought back so many great memories for me. And I hope that this show brought back more great memories for you than even last week's show did. So if you have any comments on this show or any show, this is what it's all about. Please take 5 minutes this week, drop by patreon.com/Be Our Guest Podcast, leave a few lines, and we'll share those on next week's show. All right, we got a few minutes here left, and I want to talk about this week's topic, which are 80s upgrades. And so I was thinking about this week, and as a kid, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, and I've talked about that a lot of times, but we didn't need it. We didn't go on big flashy vacations. We lived in a very modest house of less than 1,000 square feet. But the thing was, as a kid, you never think about how many square feet your house is. It's just your house. It's home. It had a backyard. It had a front yard. We lived 2 blocks away from an elementary school where as kids we could ride our bikes up to. We could play baseball at, and we had everything we needed as kids. We didn't, there was nothing that I really needed. I never thought, oh, well, I need this, so as I look back though, I was always thinking about upgrades. when I was a kid in the 80s. And so when I'm thinking back, like as a kid, I think about I had a bike, I had a dirt bike. And as I think back, it was a Huffy. Now, as a kid, a Huffy bike wasn't the coolest bike, but it was a dirt bike and it had mag wheels, which was pretty cool. I had yellow mag wheels. But the thing was, I always wanted to upgrade my dirt bike. And so one of the upgrades I wanted, and I eventually again saved up my birthday money and cutting grass money and doing chores and umpiring and stuff like that. One of the things that I had, provided I got the dirt bike for Christmas, but one of the upgrades that I really this is so stupid. One of the upgrades that I really wanted for my dirt bike was I wanted, and if you were a kid of the 80s, I always wanted to get those pads that you put on the bars, like on your front bar, on the bar between the body of the bike. So I'd always want the pad kit. And then you always wanted, well, at least I did. I shouldn't say you always did, but I wanted the upgrade, the number plate that went on the front of your dirt bike that would have like the number 21 and you would put like BMX stickers on there. So that was an upgrade as a kid, that it was almost like, because your bike was like your car and it gave you a way to customize your bike, even if it wasn't a cool bike. Like the richer kids in town had like the Mongoose bike, or they had the Diamondback dirt bike. We didn't have a lot of those in our neighborhood. Let's be honest. Like you saw them on movies and TV shows, but we didn't have a lot of those. A lot of kids around me had Huffies. But the way we would make our bike tricked out was we would go to KB or Children's Palace, or you would go to, to Toys R Us, and they did sell these kits that had like the pads of different colors and the thing you would put on the very front of your bike with the the number plate. And that was always an upgrade for your bike. Another thing that as a kid that as I got a little bit older, probably 12, an upgrade that I always wanted was that I've talked about this before, and it kind of got me into podcasting, was my grandpa gave me his old, it was kind of like a clock radio. It was a radio that had an analog clock on it in an AM radio that he had out in his garage, that he got a new speaker, he got a new stereo system for his garage where he worked a lot, his workshop. So he gave me the old one and I listened to that thing forever. But as a kid, you want, as a kid of the 80s and the early 90s, you always wanted like a boom box, right? You wanted the big boom box. And I remember like my first boom box was, it was disappointing. I'll be honest. It was kind of disappointing. I think the brand was called Grand Prix. It was some cheap brand that you got at Walgreens. And it had it had a tape player, one tape player. And this thing had one speaker grill. So I do remember that eventually I saved up my money and I got my upgrade here. And it wasn't an expensive one, but I got a boom box that had two tape players and it had two speakers, one on each side. So it looked more like your traditional 80s boom box. And it was very exciting because you had the opportunity to dub cassette tapes. And so that was a very worthy upgrade in the 80s. So that was one of those things you're always thinking, okay, I got my radio and it does play tapes, but it didn't play tapes roll out. Now, this upgrade wasn't the greatest boombox. Like, it didn't have like an equalizer. It didn't have, it wasn't gigantic like you would see in movies, but it did give me the opportunity to dub cassettes, which was pretty dang cool back in the 80s. Another upgrade, and this is so of the period. So, all growing up as a kid, I had my dad's furniture kit from when he was a kid. So I had my dad's twin bed, I had my dad's dresser, and I had my dad's kind of like desk set my desk had the Commodore 64 on it. And I had that was my bedroom set. It was my dad's from when he was a kid. Now my mom was really good. Like she refinished everything and stained it and it looked really nice. But eventually, what do you want as a kid in the 80s? Is so embarrassing. I remember that I wanted a waterbed because that's what everybody wanted at this point in life. And I remember umpiring all these baseball games. I remember that there was a 4th of July baseball tournament. And I remember that I worked every game over the weekend. And the game started at 8, and there were games every 2 hours. So I remember working 8, 10, 12. And I want to say I got like a 2-hour break. And then I worked like 2, 4, 6, and 8. and you got paid like $15 a game, $10 a game or something. And I saved all my money from that weekend. I did Saturday and Sunday. And I do remember going to, I think the store was called Mattress World on Lindbergh Boulevard. And I remember taking all that money that I made just that weekend, and I went up and I was so proud that I bought my own waterbed. And this waterbed was $99. And it had a little headboard where you could put books, like a little bookshelf. It was a twin. It didn't have any baffling. It was just the waterbed mattress. And when you got on this thing, it was probably equivalent of, I don't know, being in the Atlantic Ocean during a Category 5 hurricane, because that thing would just slosh back and forth, and it was wild. But everybody wanted a waterbed. At least it seemed like everybody wanted a waterbed in the late 80s, and so I got mine, and I still remember bringing the garden hose in through my bedroom window and filling that sucker up, and man, it was nothing better. I had a waterbed. It was so cool, and I had that thing all through high school. So that was another upgrade. And then, of course, I mentioned I had a Commodore 64 and I ran a BBS, which was a bulletin board system. People would call in to my computer and leave messages and upload video games and download video games and play very primitive online video games, multiplayer online video games that I hosted on my bulletin board called The Far Side. And of course, when you have something like that, you're always looking to upgrade your system. So at first, I had not when I ran the bulletin board, but with my Commodore 64, I had what was called a data set, which was that you saved and loaded your computer programs off a cassette tape. And it was brutally slow. And eventually, I got a disk drive, a 5.25 inch 1541 Commodore 64 disk drive. And I used that for years. And eventually, I had two of those things. I got another used one. And then I got a 1581 disk drive upgrade. And that was a 3.5 inch drive that held way more than one disk. It held many 1541 disks. It held lots of data, and I used that for my disk drive. So, with a Commodore, with a computer, you were always looking to add on peripherals, add on a RAM expansion unit to give your computer more RAM, or to give yourself more disk storage, or to make your computer faster, get a printer, stuff like that. So I was always upgrading my computer. So I was thinking about it. We all probably had items in the 80s that we liked and that we got at Christmas and that we got for our birthdays. Even cars. Like I had my first car was a 1971 MGB. Now I did never get this upgrade, but the upgrade that I always wanted was that I always wanted a Pontiac Fiero. Now I'm glad I didn't get one, because my dad didn't want me to get one, because those things always caught on fire and they were not reliable. So I never did get that, but that's an upgrade that I always wanted that I never got. But here's the question of the week. What upgrades did you have, or did you get in the 80s/90s from stuff that you had, but you just made better? You made awesome. So did you upgrade radio systems? Did you upgrade sports equipment? Did you upgrade your bedroom? Did you upgrade your car? What did you upgrade and make awesome? So please share that with us at patreon.com/be our guest podcast. And as always, thank you so much for your support of the show. And I hope you have a great week. Stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll see you real soon. All righty, guys. We will see you later.